Welcome everybody to this webinar, Output Focus, the same theme of the Backcountry Smarter with, I'm Henry and I'm here with Mark, and we'll give an overview of the various different bits and pieces of this webinar once I get myself organized and can see everybody. And I would just want to take this opportunity to quickly thank our various different partners that are up here on the screen that help us to be able to provide these webinars, and also the travel for our in-person talks in the UK coming up. We're doing a little UK tour. And the difference for me this year is that I'm going to be doing it with Mark, not just me. And we're going to do the same sort of format as last week, but with this slightly different angles on each of the topics. So I'm gonna try to keep this at a 5-minute intro, about 15-minute presentation from Mark and from me, and so that'll be about 35, probably 40 minutes total, because we go over a tiny bit. And then we'll have questions and answers. Last week it went on for well over an hour, and we're very happy to continue in the same manner this week with questions, comments, etc. So the main theme is output focused. We like to emphasize too that that you don't need to be perfect to have a great time and keep things safe out on the mountain. And our general schedule here, as it stands now, we're adding other events as we go along, but this is the second of the 3 webinars, live but not in person. And next week, we're going to go into quite a different set of topics. Each one of us going really in depth on one or 2 specific things within the off-piste toolkit. And there also you can see, just get a brief glimpse of our live in-person talks that we're going to be doing in the UK coming up. That's also on our website under Backcountry Smarter. And just a brief history behind this combination, this team effort between Mark and I, where we thought it would be really good to give an on-snow course, and then we decided, we set the dates up for that and everything you can see here. But then we thought that for the people who are going to join us on the on-snow courses, they really need a lot of information pre-season, before the talks. And we thought that everybody can benefit from it. So we opened up to everybody. And so the idea of these webinars and the talks is providing really good value to everyone, from beginner backcountry to experts and even professionals, to give you professionals some ideas for training tools for the people you ski with and everything. So this isn't a mega sales pitch for the on-snow course. It'd be great to see some of you. I know a few of you who are joining us tonight are already booked on, but the real thing is to provide you real value now that you can take away this evening and apply tomorrow if you want. So there's a little, Mark is going to do a little overview on my background, and then I'll give a little bit of a overview on his background.
Yeah, hi everyone. Henry, can you hear me okay?
Yep, can hear you loud and clear.
Great stuff. Yeah, so great to be here, and really exciting to start this winter working in partnership with Henry. So it's it's pretty motivating to be doing these new courses. I mean, Henry and myself, we've worked together, or actually known each other for a long time, and we actually started our careers pretty much at the same time. Teaching skiing in Val d'Isère, and luckily for both of us, we've been able to move around globally with our work. Henry's now developed this amazing international reputation as an avalanche awareness expert. You know, he's delivered hundreds of talks that have educated the skiing public, and have also really helped out a lot of pros going through their education and trying to get through their exams. So it's made a difference to a lot of people in the ski world now. and his framework that he's developed over the years has now really become the standard to use, and is being shared with a lot of other pro organisations. It's a method. It's easy. It's simple to use and easy to apply. And I think for both of us, whether it's Henry's framework or the way that I'm coaching, this ease of application is really important. And actually, it's been proved that some of these talks over the years have actually saved lives, which is amazing. So I can't say my technique has saved lives. Maybe it has. We'll see. But it's really impressive to hear that on Henry's presentations that he's done. So it's just a real privilege to be working with Henry. Super excited for this season. So yeah, I'll hand back to you, Henry.
Yeah, well, and your technique has helped people to enjoy their lives more through enjoying skiing more. So I'd still have to read, and I'm going to try to do this nice and quickly here, because a number of you have already heard these intros. So I know Mark, as he mentioned, we've been working together, known each other for almost 3 decades. Mark's been 25 years, has been an examiner and trainer with Basie, and helping instructors get through their pathway, many of which of them have become fully certified and trainers themselves. Mark's spent a lot of time in the backcountry on his own, but also a lot with clients as well. And like many instructors, myself included, he has a racing background. And so a lot of the technique that he applies has been through many hours of training and meticulous overviews of the various different techniques that lead to making people better skiers. So he's drawn from that experience and developed a philosophy, as he mentioned, which gets people long-lasting results and quicker. And he's got a method for that as well that he's going to chat about throughout this talk, his part of the talk. And Mark was the founding director of ICE, the International Center of Excellence, that was a instructor training, but also personal development course in Val d'Isère. He did that for, gosh, close to 20 years, was it? Or
20 years, yeah.
Yeah, and I work a lot with that group of people too, with aspiring professionals and helping them get their mountain module exams and coaching them through that. So, and he's also done a lot of ski testing events and things. What was that again, Mark? I seem to know.
Yeah.
The ski testing, because that's a really big thing that you've done, and you brought.
Yeah, it has. Yeah, so I ran the ski tests for one of the UK's leading ski magazine for getting on for 20 years, and that gave me a lot of contact with the industry, and I still do these tests. So I'm heavily involved on the hardware side as well. So that's really helped.
It's really helps. And for those of you, you're going to do a summary on that again this week, and also go into in depth on the equipment. I've learned a lot from Mark too, thanks to his work with all those tests and things. Right, let's get on with the show here. I'm going to do my presentation, and then we'll have Mark's, and then we'll have some questions, comments, answers, etc. So Henry's Avalanche Talk Safety is Freedom Framework Method, that's what I'm going to emphasize, but very specifically on one part of that, which is slope angles, and especially the 30-degree threshold. And that's what I'm going to focus on this evening. And the method is very simply a framework whereby there's 3 different sections to it, where you go decision making, how you go, and risk reduction, and what you do in a rescue for crisis management. And the idea is that by applying these points, if you do it regularly, you can keep things acceptably safe out on the mountain. And they each have titles attached to the various different safety points in the different categories, and they're also brought more to life in my pocket guide that helps you to apply them on the mountain. and in order to keep things acceptably safe. And you can see a 12-minute video summary that's very concise and comprehensive on my YouTube channel, Henry's Avalanche Talk, and on YouTube. And it's the featured video there, so that comes right up. So we're really focusing on one subject tonight, but you can get the overview and in quite an intense way on my YouTube channel. And also, of course, coming to the talks in the UK during our UK tour. So last week we covered just 2 points, mainly on the crisis management, what you do in a rescue, the equipment, and the training. And all that was around the first 15 minutes getting in there and getting someone out from underneath an avalanche in 15 minutes is really crucial, because that's the amount of time where the victim has the most chance of surviving. 75% of all deaths and accidents happen from suffocation. And that you can see on the recorded version of the replay of the webinar that's on the website and on YouTube. And also a reminder that there is transceiver rescue training in the UK in various different places, and throughout October, November, even early in December and early January. And that you can see under Backcountry Smarter on our website, and also under UK events transceiver training. So focusing on slope angles for this evening, this is in the category of decision making, where you go. And this is the biggest part of where you go in the accident reduction framework, is if you're going to go steeper than 30 degrees or not. And why is that important? Well, I've divided it up into 4 different sections that I'm going to hit on quite quickly, each one of these bullet points. And if you didn't get them all right here in this slide, I'm going to keep repeating them and bringing them up as we go through the next sort of 10 minutes or so. So the first bit is 30-degree slope angles and the no risk zone. What is that? I have a short little video clip to go over what that is, and in summary.
If you're skiing in an area where there's no slopes of 30 degrees above you that you're on or below you, you can have an enormous amount of fun in a no-risk area, risk avoidance area. Areas where there are steep slopes of 30 degrees steepness or more is avalanche terrain. 30 degrees is steep. To give you an idea, steep parts of black runs in Europe are around 30 to 35 degrees maximum. Given the tiny number of accidents involving wet and humid snow, simply avoiding these steep slopes when there's a rapid rise in temperature, especially when there is new snow, seems to work as a rule. But almost all avalanche accidents involve cold, dry slab avalanches that were triggered by the victims themselves, and the slab released on a slope of 30 degrees or steeper. You need to watch out above too, not only because more and more idiots seem to be triggering avalanches on top of other people, but also because in certain conditions you can trigger an avalanche remotely, à distance as they say in French, especially when the danger level is high.
So it's a very quick overview of the 30-degree slope angle and the no-risk zone, what that entails. And now we're going to look at deciding where to go in the accident reduction framework. It's an introduction in where you go in terms of the no-risk zone. So this idea of always being aware of where the no-risk zones are in the area where you're off-piste or touring is really important. And in fact, what I do every day is I go out into these areas of no risk, and I stay there for quite a long time if there's been some fresh snow. I call this going for the low-hanging fruit. It gives me time to consider whether or not it can be acceptably safe to go up into steeper slopes into potential avalanche terrain. And you can have a lot of fun in these areas, and remember, I've emphasized this: 30 degrees is steep, so you can stick in 25-degree slope angles and really have a great time. This is about 25 degrees right here where this video is taken. And this emphasis on terrain selection and terrain management as a priority in terms of off-piste and ski touring risk management is becoming more and more emphasized by the international avalanche safety community. And one of the things we're seeing, and as a reflection of that, is books like this coming out, A Guide to 111 Norwegian Mountains Where You Can Avoid Avalanche Terrain. Well, that's all these routes in this book are places that are in the no risk zone. So that's a quick overview of decisions and moving into the no risk zone and why you want to be doing that. And again, it's not something you have to decide for a whole day. It can be decisions that you make throughout, multiple times, dozens of times through the day. Am I going to go into avalanche terrain and steeper stuff, or I'm going to stay in the no risk areas? And so the next thing is some measurement ideas. And the first one is when you're out on the slope and using poles, equilateral triangle to measure the slope. And this really helps give an intuitive sense of what slope steepness are. And I'll get back to this intuitive idea of slope angles and why it's really important, especially while you're on the hoof or skiing, so to speak. But here's a quick little video that goes over these measurements. And this is also, or how to measure, and it's also up in my YouTube channel. What the video is in there as well, and the top tips.
We found that the easiest way to get a reference point on a slope of 30 degrees is to make a triangle, an equilateral triangle like this right here in this image. So in order to do this, the first thing you do is make a trace in the snow with one pole like you see in the foreground. And then you take the tip of one pole and put it at the top of the trace, and the tip of the other pole and put it at the bottom of the trace. And if the downhill pole is leaning towards the slope, like right here, it's less than 30 degrees. Also in this image right here, it's a little bit less than 30 degrees. And note that this is a snowboarder, so snowboarders, you can take poles with you too. It helps to push along the flats. If the pole is straight up and down like right here, then you're at 30 degrees. And if it's leaning over the slope like right here, it's more than 30 degrees. So this is a really good way of measuring slopes and getting a pretty close idea of what that 30-degree reference point is. And remember that you can have a lot of fun on slopes below 30 degrees.
So there's other little gadgets that you can get to measure the slope as well, but you need to be out there also measuring and putting the pole along the slope, or the device along the slope. Actually, on the right-hand side are apps that you put along the slope. On the left-hand side here is an app for phones where you just actually point it at the slope, and it's a little bit sophisticated, but the benefit is that you can point it at the slope and measure. I tend to get a little bit frustrated when in cold weather the battery runs out of my phone while using apps like this, and I'm also a little bit clumsy, so I really get even more frustrated when I drop my phone and other things into the snow. So I tend to stick to the pole measurement and also these map layovers, which gets back to, for those of you who joined a little bit later, the information at the top of the chat box, which was provided to us by Alex, who's with us this evening, and I did a little very brief overview in an Excel spreadsheet on the different types of layovers that you can get, or maps and apps that you can get for your phone and tablets and things. I tend to use this IGN Rondo one. I'm sort of I'm a creature of habit, and I've used this for a long time. it's very, very simple. It gets directly to what I want to know, where the steep slopes are, or when I refer to steep slopes, a lot of times I'm referring to 30-degree slopes and steeper. So I get that information right away, so it helps me to plan out the route the night before, but I can also bring this out onto the mountain, and I don't have to be sort of measuring or anything. I can be looking at it where I'm at and where the steep slopes are around me, and where I can manage going in and out of the no risk zone. So that was some measurement ideas, and then applying on the hill, and this is where the intuition helps. There's in avalanche risk management, intuition is most of the time doesn't really work and can be really dangerous for reasons I bring up on sessions I do on the human factors, and I will on the next week in the in-depth talk about just the phenomena, and how there's just so little feedback from avalanches, and most of the time nothing really happens. But with slope angle, you can really get a good intuitive feel even of what's within those 30-degree slope angles and above, or steeper than 30 degrees and less steep than 30 degrees. Here's pretty clear. And what you should really be taking into consideration is that avalanche terrain can come up right up next to areas that are not avalanche terrain, and that's where the red exclamation point right in front of us, steeper than 30 degrees, that's definitely avalanche terrain. And then the area with the green circle and the white check is an area that's not in avalanche terrain there. But it gets very, very close. And if you're not paying attention or not applying these points in the framework all the time, you can get into scenarios like this right here, where very sadly, someone right next to a blue run went out onto, it was a group of people, 3 of them were buried, 1 of them were killed, in a terrain trap, all right? And a terrain trap is one of the points that we try to, in the framework that we try to avoid, places where even small avalanches can become deadly. There can be cliffs and trees, and here it's a holes build up snow really, really deep, and that's what happened here. The person was buried under tons and tons of snow, a couple meters underneath the snow. And so this is a couple of an example of managing terrain, and just by managing terrain, being able to stay out of potentially dangerous areas. So that is applying on the hill. And before I hand it over to Mark, I'm just going to finish off in conclusion with some thoughts that will maybe steer some of the questions and comments. And so what we looked at here is mainly, like, as the title of my session is the slope angles and the no risk zone. But what if you want to go steeper, and how do the other points in the framework here apply to helping you to go keep things acceptably safe and going steeper? Well, this is the framework, and what I've done to help you, and actually help myself and even other professionals, as to remind ourselves, keep ourselves in practice of applying time and time again these points, because that's what keeps us acceptably safe out there. What I've done is I've put that an assistance or a tool to help us apply in the framework here. And so this is the way that the framework appears in the pocket guide. And there's step 1, which is the decision making, with underneath it those steps. Step 2, the risk reduction, how you go with the points underneath that, and then the crisis management in step 3 with the points under there. And this is very much a memory aid, and it's a quick view. But for ensuring a more sort of complete application, I've also, within this pocket guide, set up a system whereby there's a scoring system. So for each one of these points that I just came up with, there is a scoring system, and that you add up in the first step, and you reduce in the second step, because that's risk reduction. And then that gives you a number that you have on a scale below that helps you to get an idea of where the risk is that you're planning to go on, or where you're moving towards. And it's not designed to be used just once, but over and over again. It's not as quick as the quick view. And here it's quite a lot of information right here. So my idea with this is just to throw it out here now, and then address questions and comments on it during our question and answer session. And if not, or there's things that aren't answered there, again, you can go on to the YouTube channel Henry's Avalanche Talk and check that out. It's a featured video there, so it comes straight up. An overview of the framework and also how the scoring system works.
And you can get it on the henrysavalanchetalk.com website.
So that's my little presentation here, the Henry's Avalanche Talk method, and just emphasizing you don't need to be perfect to keep things acceptably safe and perhaps even save a life. So over to you here, Mark. I'll let you bring up your presentation here.
Great, thanks, Henry. I've just had to send a request to you.
Okay.
So, yeah. Okay, yeah. Does that come up?
I can see it. I think everybody else can see it as well.
Great. Okay. Thanks for that, Henry. So yeah, just it may be new for some of you guys, just working with my input this winter, but hopefully this will give you a really good idea of what I'm up to really when we're up on snow. I think, you know, I'll use a philosophy and a framework that's been developed over many years, and a lot of it has been from running instructor programs and running race coaching and so on, but also a lot of it from being in the backcountry. So I've got a framework that I use, a philosophy you could call it. But the main thing for anyone that's skiing with me and is really about what is the best way to get you better fast, particularly in these backcountry conditions. And so the focus of this webinar is output focus, and that's the method that I'm sort of using when I'm coaching these sort of conditions. So essentially, you know, what is output focused coaching? Well, it's really about working on the outcomes of what we're doing in the backcountry. So I don't know if you've heard that term, skiing is a series of linked recoveries. That's definitely the case often in backcountry terrain, where you have real variables on snow, and an input that you can make on one turn can give you a completely different result on the next turn. So that's one of the reasons why we're sort of focusing on output. And if I was to give you a really sort of simple guideline to the whole philosophy with this, if I can look, for example, at driving, I'm sure you all drive, and when you learn to drive, if you're in the situation where you're trying to brake the car coming up to the lights, and the instructor said to you, right, next time you brake, can you make it a bit smoother? Then you probably achieve that result. What the instructor would not have said is, next time you come to the lights, I want you to extend your ankle joint and extend your knee joint. It probably wouldn't have worked that well. So that's a good example of where the instructor is just getting you to focus on the output, the outcomes, rather than the inputs, how you actually move your body. So we're just going to explore that a bit more. So if I'm looking at output, the outcomes of skiing backcountry, what's obviously really important is control of speed and line. And we'll go a bit deeper with this and look at the sort of methods that we can use. So if we're looking to start with, in terms of control and speed, there's a couple of really easy, simple methods that you can use. And what I love about these methods is you can use them almost whatever your level of skiability is. It's more of a tactical move, really. So one method is what we call arc length, okay, which is essentially using the turn shape to control your speed. So if you imagine if you're making a turn, then hopefully it'll be a nice round arc. And if I link that all up into a circle, then you've got options here. So if I'm coming through this arc, and then I'm letting go here to move on to the new arc, then I'm probably going to be going quite fast, obviously depending on the terrain. If I hold onto that arc and let go at this point here, I'm going to be slower because I've controlled my speed by using the arc. And if I keep holding onto the arc, eventually I'll stop. But this is obviously pretty simple and hopefully very clear. And if you watch good skiers, they are very, very good at always making the right decision in terms of when to move into the new arc. That sort of saying of starting the new turn by letting go of the old one is a good saying. And where you let go and move on to the old one is crucial in terms of this control of speed. And if you watch good skiers using arc length, then if they're good at it, what they'll do is they'll always be skiing at a constant speed, and obviously it's the speed that they want to travel at, okay? So this is one method which we can use on piste or in the backcountry as well, and it's crucial to be able to use that. So again, we're trying to create a constant speed by using arc length. I've just got one example here. This is me skiing some terrain. You can see there's a bit of variation to it as I play the video. A bit steeper here, then it gets easier, then steeper again. And what you'll see is that I'm making adjustments to when I release and go from one arc into the next. So steeper here, holding onto the arc. Flattens off a bit, not holding on for so long. Gets steeper, and then I hold onto the arc again, okay? And this is simple tactics, really. I'm not talking about how we're making the turn, but at this stage, how long do you hold onto that turn? So just play it one more time. So I've essentially got a constant speed because I'm releasing and moving into the new arc at the right time. So it's a good use of arc length. So that's one method which we'll pretty much use all the time, really. And the other method we'll use is one that sometimes is misunderstood, but it's really simple. It's called skidding. So it's just really that ability to get the skis to scrape sideways over the snow so that you can control speed. Skidding is absolutely essential for steep terrain, narrow couloirs, if you're on the piste, more crowded slopes, narrow paths, that sort of thing. Yeah, very, very important in backcountry. So we'll have a quick look at skidding here. So you're scraping the skis against the snow to control speed. So I've got a bit of video here of a lady who was coaching at the beginning of last season. Again, with all video clips, it's a lot steeper than it looks, but you'll see she's using a bit of skidding to control the speed. So as soon as she's starting to go for the turn, she's turning those skis enough so they scrape against the snow and brush off speed really quickly. One of the real advantages of skidding as a method is you can use it in quite a small area, so you can cut down your speed real quick. So let's have a look here. So steep terrain, and you can see there's a lot more turning of the ski here. So she's trying to turn those skis quite quickly so she can get up some scraping against some snow and create a bit of resistance right here. There is where she's using some skidding, which just got caught on the heels a little bit. Okay, so that's a really useful method on steeper terrain. I'm just going to play it one more time. Just highlight when she's using this. So now she's skidding. Now, there. As soon as she's rotated the skis, she's using a little bit of skid and scrape against the snow to control the speed. And these are linked by quite a short traverse, but the aim of the game as you get better is to not have traverses in there at all. You're just going from one scraping sideways movement into the next.
So Mark, can I just ask you a question? When you're saying scraping and skidding, it's a bit like they're throwing like a side slip into a little side slip. Could you say that?
Exactly. And when we work on this with groups, that's often what we'll do is, as a sort of exercise, a drill to get into this, we'll side slip, slow right down, turn the skis 180 degrees, and then side slip the other way. And actually, if you have that as a base to start with, as skidding as a method, it will give you a lot of confidence, because you feel like, hey, even when it's even really steep here, I can control my speed, and I can do this while going super slow. And I think steeper sort of couloirs or whatever is a really good example of that. You know, you want to be moving slowly in this sort of terrain. So I don't know if that makes sense, Henry.
Yeah, no, it makes sense to me, and it's funny. It runs counter to what we grew up with, and for many years was very, very much emphasized, was this idea is you're not a good skier unless you're carving. But in fact, you've kind of got to be able to do everything, from what you're saying.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you look at one end of the spectrum, you've got carving, you know, really railing on the edges, right up to what we've just mentioned there, which is side slipping. And so you've got and everything at those ends and in between, that whole spectrum is skiing. And good skiers are just brilliant at just intuitively knowing what method to use for the terrain that we're in. And what you'll often see with skiers who are progressing is they'll favor one tool and try and use that same tool for everything. So if you favor carving and you like riding the skis on the edge, then that's a great tool on the piste for getting fantastic sensations out of the skis. But if you go into backcountry terrain, it's not really the tool to use, and can work against you. So yeah, I'll just move on from there. So there's the two methods of speed control, which are imperative. And then just sort of wrapping that up, really, this obviously really affects your line. So I've got a good example here. These are my tracks on the right, and then a skier on the left that was trying to work with. And you can see with the tracks on the right, you've got that nice round turn shape. It's just moving from one arc into the next. With the line on the left there, you can see it's a bit more erratic. Sometimes there's a bit of a curve, sometimes it's more of a traverse. So the line that you're producing as an outcome is really important. So there's a couple of key questions that you'd want to develop to be a really good backcountry skier. Things like, what's the shape of the turn? As we mentioned before, is it a nice round arc, or is it a sharp change of direction, which can often happen? And often you'll see skiers, when they make a sharp change of direction, it's a very quick change, and then the speed rapidly picks up, and then they've got to do something quick and rushed to try and control the speed again. Can you alter the corridor width? So, as I said before, skidding is a really good method for narrow corridor widths. So do you have that ability when you're off piste with either, you know, Henry, myself, or whoever, to control that corridor width? And this really comes back into safety. You know, if you're a safe skier, if you can control where you're going, and it might be that you're close to avalanche terrain, so there's a narrow area where you need to ski, which is safe. But if you go, I don't know, 5-10 meters to either side, it can be more risky. So that ability to have corridor width in your control is essential to make you safe. And, you know, can you adjust the radius? Can you adjust the size of the turn? Can you make a short turn, or can you make a bigger turn? Again, this will obviously affect your line and your control in this backcountry terrain. And as we mentioned just before there, is it a grippy line or is it a skiddy line? Because this, again, will really affect your ability to control speed. So these are all super important factors. And as I mentioned before, in the backcountry, this is an area where you really need to be on top of it, and you can really practice and work on these things before you get into this more challenging environment. And it's really important, these speed and line factors, because these are outcomes, and to achieve these outcomes, these outputs, it may be that the input is completely different on each turn, and we'll come on to that. So moving on from there, all of these outputs are really obviously created by the action of the ski on the snow, okay? Which again is a type of output, because you're doing something with your body, and then that ski reacts to it. So there's three things that you can do with the ski. You can adjust the edge angle, which is really about tipping the ski up onto its edge or taking it off its edge. You can adjust pressure on the ski. There's many ways of doing this, either increasing or reducing pressure, or adjusting the pressure in between both skis. Is it more on one or more equal? And also turning the ski, so rotating it. So these are the three things that you can do to the ski, and we need to use all of these different things in combinations for various situations. Now, I would say the focus with this is very much that to achieve those outcomes of a really effective control of speed and line, you have to have absolute clarity of what you're trying to achieve with the ski. It's like you've got this tool in your hand, it's under our feet, but you've got this tool and you've got it there, so you need to know exactly what you need to do to it to make it achieve the correct outcome. So from what we just mentioned there before with Henry, for example, skidding or scraping on steeper terrain, that's fine, that's what you want to achieve. Okay, well, what do I need to do with the ski? Well, to achieve that particular outcome, you need to do a big rotation of the ski, so turn the ski almost 180 degrees, not have too much edge angle, so it's quite a low edge angle, and all the pressure is on the outside ski, and that will create this skidding, scraping sensation. And I think we've mentioned this before with Henry, that on steeper terrain, this is a great example where knowing what you need to achieve with the ski can get misunderstood. So when it's steep, often the reaction will be, it's steep, it's a bit scary, I need to get lots of edge angle. But if you do that, if you get lots of edge angle, the ski will grip and will really just accelerate you across the slope, and it all starts to become scary really quickly. And then just moving on from there, so we need to be sure what we're achieving with the ski, and then that leads us into inputs, which is like, how do we make that happen? And this is really all about the movements that we make with our body and making sure that we're balanced while we're doing that. Now, this is where things can get quite complex, and I'm not going to go there really tonight. And actually, I think if you look historically with ski instruction, what I'm showing you tonight is that the starting point is outputs. How do we control our speed? What's our line? What are we trying to achieve with our ski? And if you get those things right, movements and balance will flow from there. I think a good example with balance is if you're steering nice round arcs and you've got a constant speed, it's actually really easy to balance. But if you've got sharp changes of direction and the speed is erratic, it's very hard to balance. So good movements and good balance will actually flow from good control of speed and line and having good outputs. Historically, with ski instruction, often coaching instruction starts from the other way. So often when you come for lessons, the first sort of feedback you're getting is, right, let's work on your movements. Let's, for example, make more vertical movement, or try and do something with your hips or whatever it is. And the difficulty with this is then you can, as a skier, you can become very focused on a movement that you're trying to achieve. But then when you take that into backcountry conditions, because it's quite an open environment, the outcomes that you get are really erratic and hard to work out. So hopefully that makes sense as a framework. This is why we're very much output focused in terms of trying to get better quickly in the backcountry. And then just finally, to finish off here, we're just going to have a very quick overview on gear. And as Henry mentioned earlier, a lot of my sort of expertise is with equipment based. And I would argue that having the right gear will have just as much impact on your ability to develop as any technique that I can throw at you as a coach. So I'm just going to play a video here which just gives a bit of an overview on ski touring gear and trying to get the whole setup right. We go a lot deeper into it on the next session we do on the webinar. But and also this can be something on gear. It can be something that could be opened up in the Q&A afterwards.
One of the key things with touring is that you've got to consider the whole setup as a rig in its full entirety. So classically, for example, if I went for a tech binding and a more ski touring specific boot, then I would match that up with quite a light, probably a bit narrower underfoot ski, and all of that would work really well. You've got a light ski with a light tech binding, with a lightweight boot, and the whole thing can work really well together. I mean, that would be right in front of me. That would be a great setup for long tours, hut to hut sort of work, all of those sort of scenarios. It would be a really good setup. Often what we see is it's quite easy to get pushed into making decisions where it doesn't quite match up. So for example, if I had that Salomon MTN with this 80k tech binding, but then matched it up to quite heavy duty hybrid boots, then it's not really going to match, because you're going to have a boot that very much, it's a bit heavier, but it's going to sort of overpower the skin and binding a little bit. So that won't be such a well harmonized setup. And it can go the other way. You can have a tour specific boot with a really lightweight tech binding, but then if you match that up to a heavy duty wider ski, then the ski is going to overpower the binding and to more of a great to extend the boot, so it's not going to work so well together. So this is really important. So if you're going lightweight, you've got to match lightweight ski, lightweight binding and lightweight boots. And if you're going more down the hybrid route, it's the same really. You've got to go hybrid binding, hybrid boots, and it's going to invariably be more of a mid-range type of ski. And these are often the mistakes that we see people make when they're not quite matched up together. So it really doesn't work well together as a whole unit, whether you're going up or skiing down.
Okay, so we obviously we can open up the gear for the Q&A a bit afterwards if need be. And just to summarise the whole sort of focus here is on outputs. This is very particular, I think, particularly for backcountry skiing, is focus on the outcomes as a priority rather than getting drawn into thinking specific movement patterns is your answer to being a safe skier in that sort of terrain and snow. So questions like, what's my speed? Where am I going? What am I trying to get the skis to do? And these are the sort of questions that should always be asked, and you should feel really clear about if you want to be a safe off-piste skier. And as Henry said right at the start, you don't have to be perfect when you're being out in the backcountry in terms of making decisions and rescuing and so far. But it's the same for off-piste backcountry skiing. You don't have to be perfect, but you just have to be really clear on the outcomes that you're trying to achieve, and then you can be a really good, effective, safe skier. So hopefully that's clear. I'll hand back to you, Henry, if that's okay. I'll stop sharing.
Yeah, well, and on that note, well, sorry to cut you off. Keep going.
Yep, so I'm going to stop sharing now.
Okay, and I just wanted to just as a final summary, just say I love your comparison the way you describe off-piste skiing as a series of linked recoveries, and because it really is that. And the better skiers you see are just better at recovering on each one of these links and slightly adjusting, I think. Because that really fits in with the overall kind of mantra of you don't need to be perfect with these things. And you can sort of see people who are trying to be perfect, they really get quite rigid. Whereas a lot of the really good skiers are they'll make a mistake, they'll fall back, and then they come back into the center. And I think that expression of a series of linked recoveries is fantastic for the technique. Anyway, okay, well let's I'm just gonna finish by sharing my bit and winding things down here for a question and answer session. And just before we do that, just give a quick little nod to our partners, and then with the question and answer period here in comments, whatever, please use the chat. That makes it much easier for me to manage here. So I hope you enjoyed our little presentations, and it's over to everybody who's listening in tonight.
I think just while we're waiting for questions to come through, if there's any that come through, then the next webinar is more in depth. So for what I'm presenting on the next one, we're gonna go deeper into movements and balance, because people want to know. And also on the gear side, I'm going to go much more in depth into bindings, because that's quite a confusing area. So it's about bindings and boot compatibility.
Yeah, we had that discussion, didn't we? The bindings get quite confusing. Boots are confusing just because there's such a huge range, but bindings really can use some good explanation about fitting in and matching the rest of the rig. I've heard the setup, you've used the word rig. I like that word for the setup, where all three, binding, boot, and ski, come together as being called the rig. And next week, what I'm going to do is hit on the concept of triggering, how and why where and why avalanches are triggered. And I'm going to really emphasize why avalanches are not triggered, because for me, that's the thing that creates the real lack of the lack of attention that we all find ourselves in, from every level, from professionals down to first timers. The fact that most of the time nothing happens, even when it's really unstable, leads us to a certain sense of complacency that's summed up in human factors, we say, but it's really the complacency that we get kind of lured into. And what happens when we feel complacent, we don't apply those key points in the framework. And that's why most of the time when there's an accident, there's two things. First of all, it's identified after the overview of what happened in the accident that there were clear signs of danger, and that most of the time, not all the time, but most of the time, people in the group had enough training to have been able to recognize those signs of danger. But because we don't get feedback from the environment, and because nothing happens most of the time, we get lured into this complacency. So one thing I'm going to stress is not only how there's certain steps. There's 4 steps, 4-step model for that shows how avalanches are triggered, and you have to have each one of those steps happen. Otherwise, you don't get the avalanche. And it really shows for me why avalanches don't happen when it's really unstable a lot of the time. And I think most of you if you've done some off-piste and quite a bit of off touring, you'll notice that even when the danger level goes up, there's lots of talk about how dangerous it is. A lot of times you'll see the whole mountain tracked out, and nothing's really happened, and you might have heard some accident somewhere else, but and then something does, and it's awful. Okay, so I have a question here on the framework. What tools, methods, etc., do you suggest for assessing dry slab activity and wind loading, and also knowing whether there is a persistent weak layer or mass skier compaction, step 4? I'm going to bring that up for the for answering this. I might have to. Oh, here we go. So I'll bring up the one with the scores on it, so you give you a chance to check out the scores and everything. So the first thing is the more straightforward, knowing whether there is persistent weak layer or mass skier compaction. Well, persistent weak layer, you'll hear about in the avalanche forecast. If you haven't been out in the resort or the mountain area that you're touring, and you'll see it in the avalanche forecast. There's also otherwise there'll be lots and lots of talk about it. I'm not a huge fan of digging snow pits, because the best people for digging snow pits are the avalanche forecasters. And if there's a persistent weak layer, it'll be right out there in the avalanche forecast. However, if it's very educational, and I think the most educational when you dig snow pits, when there is a persistent weak layer, you can really see it if you dig down. So that's for finding persistent weak layers. What I suggest is go to the experts, the best experts of the avalanche forecasters, and because they're digging like pits, if not every day, several every week. And mass skier compaction are the regularly traveled off-piste routes in a lot of these areas that many of you will go for your off-piste adventures. Like, well, it could be Val d'Isère, could be the Alberg, Tignes, the Three Valleys. There's regularly traveled routes. Now, one thing I'm going to add on to that, and hopefully that's clear, it's the regularly traveled routes. It's not just a couple hundred people, but it's thousands and thousands of people who've compacted those slopes. It can be, a lot of these places there's touring going on, and even where there's places where it takes an hour or so to tour, 2 hours to tour, they get really packed down. Now, one way that we all get, and I say all of us, even professionals, get really caught out is in the early season, and you'll hear about the early season snowpack, which is inherently unstable, not all the time, but often unstable. Touch on this from triggering next week. And one of the things that catches us out, though, also is all of the classic routes that have been skied and snowboarded on and everything else don't have that skier compaction. So I know a number of professionals, really, really competent people, who got caught out early season because they were doing the classics, and applying their points, or their risk management and everything the way they did when there was lots of skier compaction. So I hope that makes sense. And if you have any comments, come back with that. Now, the wind, I don't mention wind very much, and I'll tell you why in a second, but I do mention it. Recent avalanche activity is, so what tools, methods do you suggest for assessing dry slab activity and wind loading? Recent avalanche activity, number one, and I think when there's some dry slab activity or new snow wind loading in the last 24 hours, I mention it there. Also, for recent avalanche activity, that will be in the danger in the bulletin because often in the bulletin, if there has been like an accidental avalanche, that is really, really good feedback for recent avalanche activity. And it'll almost always show up in a bulletin if there's been some even little accidents here and there. I mean, little where there hasn't been people killed or really, really badly injured. Now, with wind is in terms of the creation of instability, it's really important. But what I've found is the best way, and this is an output focused kind of thing. One of the reasons why Mark and I have come together. So if you start with recent avalanche activity, you'll notice if you've looked around after a snowstorm that a lot of the recent avalanche activity, almost all the time after a storm, it's fairly confined to certain slope aspects. It could be south, north, east, west, whatever. And if you work back at deducing, coming out, why are is that recent avalanche activity happening on those slopes, then you can start to get an idea of where the wind may have been coming from. And I find that's a much clearer and much more concise way of assessing the dry slab activity and wind loading, rather than the other way around. Because if you start with a wind twirls around in the mountains. Sometimes wind creates more stability, especially high winds, and sometimes you get instability on windward slopes. So if you start with the recent avalanche activity and then work your way back to the wind and where it was coming from, it's a lot more effective in applying these key points. Because remember, it's applying these points. It's not just knowing about it, it's applying them. And if you go down a rabbit hole about where the wind's been coming from and where it's been spinning, but over there, it looked like it came out of the east, but and then in the middle of the night, it switched from then you're not focusing on applying these key points. You're talking about a phenomenon that's very interesting, and it does contribute to instability, but it's not getting at the key points. An example, okay, I mentioned there an example of early season dates. Yeah, that's a bit when I say if it's cold out. Where I live at 1,800 meters, almost 2,000 meters, cold is like -30 or so, or -25, whereas at sea level in a lot of places where a lot of people who are listening tonight, cold might be sort of 0 degrees to -4 or so. So example of early season dates is like end of November, early December. And that's when you have this problem of early season snowpack, which is inherently unstable anyway on certain years. And also you don't have that skier compaction that you do after thousands and thousands and tens of thousands of people have done the classic routes by sort of usually by February or so, sometimes by the 1st of January. And I'll make a point. I know that I can think of actually 3 or 4 really tragic accidents that happened early January because there was so little snow. It didn't really even snow until like mid-December, end of December. So a lot of people got caught out by that early season snowpack in January. Does that make sense? And also, Ellie was asked those really key questions about the dry slab activity and wind loading, as well as the persistent weak layers and mass skier compaction in the step 4. I mean, this is made to be a reference, and what I find, and me as a professional when I work with a group with it, is it's not something that's set in concrete. We go back and forth and discuss, and sometimes, and I didn't put it up here because I tried to take some of the wording out, but in the actual pocket guide, I said that these numbers can be modified if you base it on facts and evidence. And so sometimes, like if it's a danger level of 2, and there's lots of recent avalanche activity, I'll be like, whoa, maybe we should, and lots of wind loading, as you pointed out, then notch it up a little bit. But in France, where the forecasting services have the tendency of rating, giving higher danger ratings than, for example, in Switzerland, you'll see that in the Porte du Soleil, right around the border. Often in Switzerland, it's a danger level, one danger level below in Switzerland, and a higher one over in the Porte du Soleil area. Or in Champéry in Switzerland, it'll be lower than it is on the Châtel on the French side or something, whatever. So So if there's a danger level of 3 or 4, let's say, and practically no recent avalanche activity, then that just doesn't fit the definition, especially for a 4. If a 4, there's got to be natural avalanche activity, all kinds of stuff going on. And if there isn't, then that's based on facts and evidence. Maybe you can bring it down on the scale a little bit. And also, there's often a question, well, what do you mean? What's accidental? What's natural? Natural avalanches happen by themselves. They're not triggered by people. Accidental are triggered by people. And again, 95% of the time, avalanche accidents happen because people triggered the avalanche. The victims triggered the avalanche themselves. All right. Apologize for that long monologue, but I think those were really good leading questions that warranted a little bit of a monologue. And if you have any more questions, go ahead and ask. But I want to give Mark a chance to say some stuff. Okay, thanks for the feedback. There's been feedback that the input is the beta for process to make decisions, and that was appreciated. So thank you for that, Dan. Any questions for Mark here on technique and equipment?
Looks like it's all covered, Henry. As I say, I'll go deeper into because that was a real quick overview on the video that you saw on gear, and I'll go a lot deeper into bindings and boot compatibility on the next webinar that we do. But certainly for what you guys are into, backcountry skiing and touring, over the last 10 years, the amount of equipment that's available out there is just multiplied, and now there's much more choice, which is great, but it can cause a bit of confusion. Essentially, when you're looking at ski touring, you're looking at some different categories there, what we'd call sort of lightweight tech gear or hybrid. And if you're looking at bindings, you can also even still use frame bindings with more sort of traditional alpine boots. So yeah, it's a big area at the moment. So yeah.
And I saw you got some questions from last week, a couple of emails about equipment. Is there anything that could be useful in your exchange with the individual? I think there was a couple people were asking you about equipment on individual emails. Anything that could be useful to everybody, do you think?
Yeah, it was just people often get people just asking the question of what gear should I use, and it's not an easy question to answer unless you've really got the sort of person face to face there. But so I just, from what I've seen a lot this winter, is that it can be it's easy for people to get it wrong in terms of they're looking to do a bit of ski touring, they've tried a little bit, they've found the going up quite hard work, so they're focused very much on lightweight gear. But I'm generalizing here, you can often have too much emphasis on saving weight and not enough emphasis on what's going to make life easier in general for what I'm doing when I'm in the backcountry. So I think I'm generalizing now, but I see a lot of people in quite light gear that
yes, I do too.
Haven't really got the technique to sort of back it up, and they're making it hard work.
Well, that's that I tend to do a lot of touring and work with a group of guys who are more sort of more into the touring and like hut touring kind of thing. And I've noticed with us that people sort of follow our example, and they're in the lightweight, not enough support. And it's especially apparent I've seen with people who don't really have the technique, but they've been skiing a lot with with that type of profile of a professional, and the professional, yeah, and they'll buy these like really ultralight boots, ultralight skis, and then they get into difficult snow and they're falling all over the place. You can't even get to working with technique because they're so unstable with the skis, and they really should use something that, well, you've referred to as hybrid. So I guess hybrid. It seems to me there's so many boots out there. They're all a little bit hybrid, except for the really.
Yeah. I mean, hybrid. If basically from the industry side, hybrid is a touring boot that will use what they call a grip walk sole. So with a grip walk sole, you can use it in a touring tech.
That's like a Vibram sole, like
No, it's not.
Oh, it isn't. Okay.
No, it's not. So you've got
sole.
Yeah, so it's called grip walk. It's a type of sole which is now used by all of the industry in most of their boots. And previously with touring boots, and you can still get touring boots with Vibram soles. Now, if you've got a Vibram soled classic touring boots, it will only work in a tech like a pin binding.
Okay.
The grip walk sole with the inserts, so that Lang that you saw in the video, for example,
the Lang was a hybrid, like a pretty.
That was a hybrid, right? But this is the key point. So that would work in a tech binding, but it will also work in a normal classic alpine binding as well.
Yeah.
And you can't do that with a Vibram soled touring binding because it won't release effectively. It's not safe. So these are really important considerations, and I've seen it. I've seen a lot of people there skiing around on a touring boot, but actually they're in a binding where it's actually not compatible and doesn't work. And it's amazing how many shop staff don't have a full understanding of it.
Yeah, well, obviously, I guess now you describe it, I can see the difference, but I wouldn't. It wouldn't be on my radar screen necessarily.
Yeah.
But so grip walk is that'll work in everything, right? Bindings.
This is where it's confusing. So it'll work in most alpine bindings except for a race, a race binding where it needs to be more of just that hard plastic base.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
All right.
So I could go on about it, but
okay. But basically, for what we're doing and everybody with us in this session, they're not going to be on like race skis with a touring with even a hybrid touring boot, or
no, but they might be on what they might be doing, hopefully not, but they might be on a touring boot they've had for quite a few years.
Yeah.
In a binding that's not designed to work with that boot sole, and therefore it won't release properly.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that makes a lot of sense. Now I've seen another question here, and for those of you who are in the comments, I think if you click on the, I don't know, there might be, I think there's somewhere you can click before you ask the question, you can click to post, host and panelists, or you can click to everybody. And if you feel comfortable, please share it with everybody, because that way, sort of everybody knows what's going on. But I will keep repeating the questions as I see them. I have never skied on lightweight gear. What is the biggest difference going downhill in terms of technique, choice of line, etc.? Do you want me to repeat that? I've never skied on lightweight gear before, but what is the biggest difference? I assume if I get lightweight ski gear, what am I gonna find as being different as I'm going downhill in terms of technique, choice of line, and the other points, size of the arc, and all the different great things that you talked about.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's lighter. So, but and I have to say, lightweight gear has got a lot better, even over the last 3 years.
Lightweight skis have gotten better. I think you mentioned that with the MTN.
Yeah, it's been some real development,
which I've had a great experience on.
Yeah, there's been some real developments in material and placement of material. So lightweight skis are a lot better than they used to be. But essentially, with lightweight gear, you're going to find them really, really quick to pivot and rotate. So that's a benefit. But the downsides are that you don't get the stability and support that a lot of skiers like when they're actually going through the turn. And I think the thing is with backcountry skiing, we all like to think we're skiing great power all the time, but the often reality is we're not doing that. We're often skiing conditions which are a bit chopped up, a bit cruddy, or the snow varies. And actually, in those conditions, it is hard. And if you're in very lightweight gear, I see this happen quite a lot, then you feel like you're really getting pushed around by the conditions, and it's hard to develop that confidence. So in those sort of conditions, if you've got something sometimes that's maybe a bit heavier, but it's got a bit more stability, more support from the boot at the ski and the binding, then it's just easier to ski through and make those nice round arcs. And the other thing I would say, and again, I've got to be careful because I've gone forever about this, but with really lightweight tech bindings, the placement of the screws on the binding where it's inserted in the ski is very different to like a hybrid binding. So when you turn or tilt the ski onto its edge with a tech binding, there's quite a slow response onto the edges. It's not that effective. Whereas with something like a hybrid binding, as soon as you make a movement with the boot, you're going to get a much quicker, more efficient reaction to the ski. So yeah, that's some sort of overview of what would happen in lighter gear.
All right, well, that makes sense to me. Does that make sense? Anyone have any other questions on that or anything else? Okay, well, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to start winding down the session here. If by just sharing a couple of the last slides and things. And in the meantime, if anyone has any questions, fire away. But it's been great having such a engaged group and really, quite a few people. It's great. Had about 25 people, 26, 27 at the height of the session here. That's a good little session. Shows lots of interest. And let's see, did I just unshare everything?
Yeah, it's just you. Okay.
Okay. There we are. So again, a little nod to our partners here for the session, this preseason session here, and the live sessions we're going to be doing all throughout until pretty much close to the end of November. We're going to be at one thing that didn't show up in the materials I showed was that we're going to be at the Kendall Mountain Festival as well on the Ortobox stand, and we're going to be giving a talk there on the Friday afternoon, I believe. So this was Backcountry Smarter, the webinar output focused with Henry and Mark. You don't have to be perfect to have a great time in the mountains and keep things acceptably safe. Oh, there was one more message here from Dan. The equipment summary of applying the logic of matching equipment is great. Thanks for that. So on that note, I wish everybody a very good evening, and hope to see you next week here on Backcountry Smarter, where off-piste and touring is better and more intelligent, as well as on Henry's Avalanche Talk, where safety is freedom. Thanks very much, everybody, and thanks for your nice comments and your engagement with the talk.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care, everybody.
Take care.